Hi, Mileidy. Good to see you.
Hi, how are you, Shirish?
Fantastic.
Great
Fantastic.
to see you too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start the session. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this fireside chat with Mileidy Bernal Campos, founder and CEO of Finintegra, based in Canada. My name is Shirish Pathak, and I'm delighted to host this chat today, and even more delighted that Mileidy is ready to share her thoughts with us. But before we start, let me introduce you all to Mileidy. As I mentioned earlier, she is the founder and CEO of Finintegra. Sorry, she specializes in AML CFT policy, FATF standards, virtual assets, and financial intelligence. She completed the public leadership credential at Harvard Kennedy School and has, in earlier roles, been associated with the Egmont Group of FIUs, Cafilat, and the FIU of Mexico. I will later place her LinkedIn profile in the chat window so that those of you who would like to see a more detailed profile can do so. I first met Mileidy actually in 2019 when she spoke at our Fintelekt Asia Summit that was held in Hanoi, at which she was representing the Egmont Group, and we have stayed in touch since then. So recently, I saw that she published an article titled Rethinking the Logic Behind the FATF Grey List, and that actually prompted me to do a more detailed conversation with her on the subject, and that's why we are here today. So today we will discuss what exactly is the FATF Grey List, uncover some of the myths about being on the list, also discuss how lower capacity countries with limited global financial interconnection deal with being grey listed, as well as the real world impact of being a grey listed country. So, Mileidy, again, welcome to this chat and thank you so much for joining us. Before we get on to the actual discussion, can you tell us a bit about Finintegra and why you founded it?
Yes, thank you so much, Shirish. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so honored and humbled to be invited by Fintelekt. As you mentioned, we've been in touch since 2019, and I've been looking forward to have any type of collaboration, of having any type of collaboration with you. So this is a great opportunity. Finintegra is it's a new company just founded in this year, and it's trying to bring a new lens to the same conversations from on the one hand, but also we want to help countries and international organizations into improving AML CFT regimes. We have different specialists in for the different areas, and the key our expertise is focused around financial intelligence, as many of us have worked with financial intelligence units, but as well bringing a component of anti-corruption and integrity.
Right. Thanks. Thanks for that introduction, Milady. So to begin, let's discuss the basics first. Could you explain in simple terms what it really means for a country to be grey listed by the FATF and how it is different from being blacklisted?
Yes, that's a very important, and that I think that's why brought me to write this piece, because as soon as the FATF finished their its plenary, its June plenary, I started seeing around LinkedIn so many updates trying to say, okay, now we have two new listed countries. Those are Bolivia and the British Virgin Islands. And nothing had any kind of context in terms of what was happening with those two countries. It happened that those two countries are in the Americas, but it could have been, as it is right now, Laos, Vietnam, or Nepal, that are in Asia. So I started seeing these updates with many of our colleagues, and I tried to put myself in the shoes of the compliance officers. So what I'm going to do, because many times we are required to apply measures of due diligence, especially for those countries that are gray listed. So I try to make sense of what was happening. And the first thing that is we need to clarify is the difference between gray list and blacklist. Yes, of course, being part of different processes of mutual evaluations, I'm familiar with these two terms, and the difference between a gray list is that FATF specifically requires that we apply enhance due diligence to these countries, and only if the FATF calls out for that, we are going to apply countermeasures, or even the country itself. But it's not a blacklist in the sense that we need to close our relationships. We need to apply a de-risking policy to those countries. Instead, it's I'm positive in terms of what FATF is telling us exactly what to look at when countries are gray listed. It means that they have strategic deficiencies. It means that they are working towards addressing those deficiencies. Sometimes these deficiencies are what we call technical compliance. That means their regulatory framework, legislative framework needs to be enhanced. It needs modifications, amendments, but it's not an issue of lacking AML CFT regime at all. It's it's an issue that we need to address. Sometimes it is, as mentioned again, legal, normative, regulatory, and in other cases it's more operational in terms of increasing the number of investigations, increasing the number of confiscations, providing more resources to specific agencies. So when we're looking at the gray lists, we need to look at exactly why countries were gray listed. So we can actually apply our risk-based approach and complete our enhanced due diligence. So gray list is a signal of engagement. It means countries are working with the FATF and the FATF style regional bodies. There are different regional bodies, and depending on where the country is located, maybe we are going to be working with the Asian and Pacific group on anti-money laundering, or maybe we are going to work with GAFILAT, or maybe we are going to work with the CFATF. It depends where the country is located and its membership.
Right. Thanks, Mileidy. So, coming to the next point, what would you say are some of the most immediate or most of the visible economic or reputational consequences that countries face when they are placed on the gray list? And, a majority of our attendees today are people from the compliance function, and many of them are from the private sector, financial institutions. So both from a country point of view as well as from the private sector point of view, how does being on the gray list affect people?
Yes, that's the other point, right? Because once a country has been gray listed, so many, I mean, that's the issue with the gray list. There's no country that wants to be part of the gray list, because we know that immediately we will have consequences in banking relationships, correspondent access, investments. So I think that's the how it feels. And I know that because I've known some countries that have been part of the gray list, that they start feeling that pressure from the outside, because countries start not necessarily applying enhanced due diligence, but closing relationships with those countries. So it's a lot of pressure to their financial system, to their economies even. And that's the other reason why was prompted to write about that. We need to look at that when we are looking at the gray listed countries. Actually, the consequences are for the society as well, because the economy will feel it, because the banking and the financial system is going to feel it, because other countries are going to pay more attention, and not necessarily in a good way in terms of enhancing their due diligence processes and procedures, but applying an overcautious approach instead of a risk-based approach. So that's one thing. And the other thing, as you mentioned, is reputational damage. Once a country is gray listed, they are seen like, well, these are kind of non-compliant countries. And the reason for being gray listed is because they are working, but they need to keep working, and they have deficiencies that sometimes are structural or fundamental, so they need the external pressure. So and that's their issue, right? When the FATF is established, they need a tooth, and those tooth are the gray list, and we cannot forget that part of the FATF. We cannot forget that they are the watchdog of the AML-CFT regime, and that precisely the gray list is the way they can put pressure so countries can actually modify and improve their AML-CFT regime.
Right. So, Mileidy, in your article, I think you also made mention to this term called proportionality, and FATF applying it. So, can you explain what is this concept of proportionality with respect to how FATF applies it or uses it?
Yes, I think, let me start with the recommendation 19. If here we have any other fan of the FATF standards, maybe you know by now that recommendation 19 is calling for measures and specifically for high-risk jurisdictions. So based on this recommendation, countries establish in their regulations and their legislations the need for applying specific measures. I'm saying this very generally because we need to look at the specific country to understand how they are looking at the high risk jurisdictions. So once we have that, we have again gray lists and blacklists. And then with gray lists, we need to apply proportionate measures. The issue is that we don't have that definition of proportionate measures. So when I was looking at the list, we have Monaco, for instance. We have Bolivia, we have Laos, we have Vietnam. Are these economies comparable? Can we make a fair comparison? Because and are we going to treat all of them equally? Are they posing the same type of risk to the financial system, the global financial system, the global economy? And the issues, from my point of view, is that no, they are different. They have different economic profiles, these jurisdictions and countries. So we need to look at the lists themselves to understand what we need to apply when we are talking about proportionate measures. And the issue, going back to your question, is that sometimes these measures are not proportionate. So again, it creates a vicious circle where countries feel a lot of pressure, feel their economies is struggling because of the gray list. But the issue is that countries are gray listed, but again, I'm going back to my point. We have British Virgin Islands, Monaco, and they are all listed with Bolivia, Nepal, Laos, Kenya. Are these really that is a question for us more than for yes, it's a question for everyone here. And if we respond or we agree that it's not, that these countries are different, then we need to apply different measures to them, because the risk of money laundering or countering terrorist financing are different. So we need to treat them differently.
Right. So, Mileidy, let's move now on to the myths or misconceptions about grey listing. So, you have also argued in your article that grey listing, and you also mentioned this some time back, that grey listing is not necessarily a sign of failure, but can actually indicate a commitment to reform. So, could you speak about some of the common misconceptions about grey lists that you feel need to be addressed?
Yes, thank you. I would say that the first misconception has to do with the simplistic views of gray lists. So a new country is added to the gray list. Yes, okay, that's true, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to dig deeper to understand that gray list comes after a long process that starts when the country is preparing itself for receiving the assessment team, the mutual evaluation assessment team, when after writing and facing the team, and after discussing their findings in the plenary meeting of the FATF or the FSRB, and then depending on its ratings and level of effectiveness, they will have a period of observation where they can implement different measures so they can actually start working. But they have around 1 year, and during that year we are going to see different changes in different countries, and once they finalize that year, then they have a meeting with the review group. They analyze how they are, the type of advance they have, their commitments, and then it's decided an action plan. If that, and they have this action plan is time bound. So that's that we they need to produce countries need to produce results in a very specific time frame. It's not that they will be there for a long time. There are some exceptions, but these exceptions have very specific social context, like Haiti. But that's different. Haiti is different. Specifically, it's an exception. But in the other cases, what we see is that gray list again comes after a long process. And once they are gray listed, countries have a very specific time frame to modify their to implement the measures that are supposed to improve or their AML-CFT regime. But when I'm saying improve, is to bring this country to a minimum of compliance and effectiveness level. Yes, and achieving a specific level, minimum, basic level of effectiveness. So it's not that they are improving to be substantial or high level of effectiveness or having everything compliant. Ideally, that's the case, but they have to improve at a minimum. So that is the point with FATF and gray listed countries. So one of the misconceptions has to do with that. It's like, okay, countries have a bad AML/CFT regime. We need to avoid risks in our relationships with these countries. No, the first thing is that we need to understand is that most of the countries are are gray listed after a long process, usually 2 or 3 years, where they cannot achieve a minimum, and because they haven't achieved that minimum, then they commit to an action plan that is time bound. That's I would say the biggest misconception around being gray listed, and of course is not a trigger for automatic sanctions. It's an invitation for us. I'm saying invitation, but it's a call for us to apply a more detailed due diligence, looking at those relationships into a more thorough way, so we can understand the risks ourselves.
Right. So thanks for that, Mileidy. So you also have spoken about in the article, I believe, about an analytical silence on the assessment methodology, right? And its interpretation of what constitutes systemic or international financial risk. So do you believe that the FATF assessment methodology can do with more clarity and transparency? And if so, in which areas? And there's a related question in the chat by Afzal, who asks, by when does FATF decide that a particular country needs to be categorized either under the grey list or blacklist? And what are the key areas that FATF looks at before putting them under any of these lists? So if you can speak a bit about this analytical silence on the assessment methodology, that would be great.
Yes. So I would expect more more from the FATF, and what I'm and why. Because if we look at the standards, of course, the 440 recommendations, the interpretative notes, and all the guidance, the universal procedures of mutual assessment, mutual evaluations, and the methodology for assessing the technical compliance and effectiveness of the FATF, we don't see anything regarding global risk. And again, we need to understand why Monaco and the British Virgin Islands are in the same list and category with Bolivia, Venezuela, or Kenya or Laos. So are these Algeria? Are these countries comparable? So that's why I would expect more from FATF telling us more about the reasons for listing, right? Because when we see the lists, we need to be reading between lines to understand what is happening with the country. And really, I just saw the chat, and I read this question on what is the points that the FATF is looking at. And when we are seeing the lists, we can see many reasons. We can see many reasons to be listed. So it's not that the FATF is looking at the specific areas, but it's looking at the specific country. So the country needs to address those deficiencies that are more urgent to improve their AML/CFT regime and bringing its compliance and effectiveness level to a minimum. I would say that's the general question, without entering in specific cases for now.
Right. So talking about, let's say, what can be a predictor for gray listing outcomes, right? Do you think institutional capacity, or let's say the lack of institutional capacity, okay, is that something that becomes one of the reasons that some, countries in the gray list? And also, is it a realistic expectation from developing economies whose, let's say, socioeconomic priorities may not align with FATF expectations?
In many cases, we see a lack of capacity. But it's not the same lacking a capacity in terms of supervision of financial institutions, lack of capacity in supervising designated non-financial businesses and professions, as having deficiencies or lack of capacity in the law enforcement side. So lack of capacity is it's so broad because we are looking at the different elements of the system. Are we talking about prevention? Are we talking about enforcement? Are we talking about investigation or analysis in terms of the capacity of the financial intelligence unit, or maybe international cooperation? So in that case, we need to look at the specific case to understand exactly where is the need for improving the capacity. And same, when we're talking about capacity, we need to be granular in terms of are we talking about financial resources, capacity, or training of the resources that are already existing, or technological resources? Most of the time is we are talking about capacities, lack of capacity in a very general term, but but if we look at the specific listings, we are going to see that the FATF is going to be specific in terms specific. It's we can again we have to read between lines, but we can see where the country is failing.
Right. So let me ask you a slightly tricky question now. You may or may not want to respond to that. There have been some critics who have pointed to geopolitical influences in FATF's decisions. So, to what extent do you believe that the grey listing process is sort of a technical exercise versus political exercise, and which one has more sway over the other?
Geopolitical influences. It's a tricky question indeed. It's a tricky question, but here we can look at the lists themselves, at the Grey List. We talk about that, and we have 25 countries, and none of them is a FATF member. We have from APG, Monibal. Monibal has Monaco and Bulgaria, but also from APG we have Nepal, Laos, and Vietnam. From Gafilat we have Bolivia. FATF has Venezuela, British Virgin Islands. We have Samalag. We have Gabak, Java, but we don't have FATF members. So because we don't have an entire visibility of how these decisions are made, we can only speculate. So that's another way to say, okay, countries could also ask for more transparency, or maybe they should be more open to provide more transparency into those decisions, because the only tools we have to answer that question is what FATF has said publicly. If we look at the countries, they don't say much in terms of what is happening to modify their regime. So we can only speculate what is happening, but we cannot say for certain that something is happening or not. The truth is that we have 25 countries and we don't have any FATF member being part of that list. So we need to assume that, do we need to assume anything? So that's or not. So it's just like well, I don't know. At this point, I don't know. It's a very tricky question because we don't have anything but the public information that is provided by the FATF itself. So if FATF doesn't want to provide any transparency in terms of how their decisions are made, we can only speculate.
Right. Thanks. Well taken. Mileidy, my last question to you is: so we know that grey listing is known to have a human cost. Okay, there have been instances when grey listing measures have affected marginalized groups. It has possibly affected or made remittances stricter in certain countries. Also, in the question chat, I can see someone has written that where's that gone? That compliance status for a country as a whole, but from the private sector viewpoint, how do we associate countries' status with the controls implemented by a particular financial institution, right? So now, in closing, what advice would you give to compliance professionals or regulators or the private sector, banks, financial institutions in countries that either are already grey listed or at risk of grey listing, as to how they should address it or approach it?
Yes, I would like to bring a specific case because we have 3 specific countries listed from the APG. That's the Asian Pacific Group on money and money laundering. So let's imagine that, well, you are a compliance officer in India, or just I'm imagining India because that's where Fintelekt is located. So let's say that a corporate client wants to send 150,000 to a company in a Laos special economic zone for construction consultancy. I've been thinking about this scenario. So what are we going to do with that case? How we're going to manage? If we see what is happening in Laos and how I'm just saying, just give me a second to find what happened in Laos. They've been pre-listed for a long time. Yes, well, no, yes, the mutual evaluation of Laos was in 2023, and in 2025, February this year, they were listed. So the country started with 2 things. They needed to increase their financial intelligence unit staffing and resources. So here we can see that specifically they are saying staffing for the FIU and resources. So it means they need to increase the budget and they need to increase the technological tools. And they need to eliminate bearer shares to improve transparency. Okay, those things have been worked on. But FATF wants to be more work on better understanding of AML, money laundering and terrorist financing risks. That is huge because that implies work from the financial sector, but also from the NFPPs, non-financial sector, and the authorities. So that's a lot. But we see they need also work on their risk-based supervision for casinos, banks, and special economic zones. So we have that. They have to increase the quality of the financial intelligence and proactive dissemination to law enforcement. They have like 9 items, if we see it, to that. They need a national confiscation policy aligned with identified risk, effective seizure and confiscation mechanisms. So what would you do in that case? What I do is to verify, because they have deficiencies with the beneficial owner, if is the law company real? What is the beneficial ownership information? I would verify the licensing of this company. Remember, in our scenario, we need to look at that, at the construction consultancy company. So I would look at the licensing of for the special economic zone operation of the company and the zone itself. Why they are located in that specific economic zone, the pricing, is it normal or not? And I would request more information on the client. I would screen for adverse media, validate invoices, and then proceed with the decision only if I'm satisfied with the documentation provided by the company, and also if understand if I'm facing any kind of risk and that risk is mitigated. Because again, we have among all the lists, the listing reasons that apply to Laos. Here in this example, we have economic casinos and special economic zones, beneficial ownership, weak money laundering investigations, FIU capacity developing. So those are the risks. I need to look at that specifically and then understand what is happening. If I'm satisfied with the information I received, then okay, I can proceed. If we go to another example, Nepal. We have a small Nepalese money service business that wants to send $120,000 to Dubai, claiming its pool remittances from many customers buying electronics. We go and look at the MER, we go and look at the Grey List, and we see that here in this case, we have 3 reasons but we need to look at 3 specific areas. First, there is a weak supervision of money of MVST and MVTS,
Yes.
money value and transmitter services, and we have inadequate beneficial owner transparency, and we have low prosecution and asset recovery. In this case, what I'm going to do as a compliance officer, I'm going to look at who are the remitters. I'm going to look at the license of the MSB, the beneficial owner details. I'm going to assess whether Dubai Electronics is a known TBML corridor. I'm going to demand customer lists, invoices, contracts. If I cannot verify all that information, I'm going to reject. But because I looked into the risks, the specific areas, I can enhance my due diligence, right? So it's not that I'm deciding to automatically reject the transaction. What I'm going to do is to look at the counterparty and decide based on that. Because I would say that if a specific sector has been red flagged by the FATF, then I need to look into more detail into that sector. That's how I would proceed, but I don't know if our audience agrees or not.
No, I think that's a very, very good explanation, and I think you've covered the issues from a strategic point of view as well as from a very operational and down to earth point of view. And I think what you said has actually helped to answer some of the questions that I can see in the chat. With that, Mileidy, thank you so much for being here on this chat with me. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's really early in the morning in Canada right now, so thanks for waking up early for us. And it was really nice having you.
Oh, no, it was a pleasure for me. Thank you, Shirish. And I'm happy that we can see each other, well, at least through the screens.
Yes.
And I'm honored again. Thank you and congratulations to the work of Fintelekt. And
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I follow you on social media, so thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for the invitation. And if you have any other questions or if you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And you can find on LinkedIn the Finintegra's page as well. We
Yes.
will keep publishing on Grey List and understanding how we can look at the different profiles of each country that is Grey Listed. So I think this conversation needs to keep going and understanding how we can better apply our enhanced due diligence when it comes to, again, Grey Listed countries.
Right. Yes. So, participants, as Mileidy said, if you would like to continue the conversation with her offline, I have already put her LinkedIn address in the chat, and feel free to connect with her and send her any follow-up questions that you may have directly, and I'm sure she'll send you some answers. With that, let's close this session today. Thanks to everyone for attending. And Mileidy, thanks for speaking, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.